Okay, welcome back, and I'm hoping to not spend too much more time because I don't know how long this is going to take to upload for all of you, plus the duration of this presentation is going on a bit. But this is the fourth section titled, Is AEthelflaed an Anglo-Saxon Judith? Okay, so the following is shared from, the following quote is shared from my senior thesis. Quote, to begin, both the character Judith and AEthelflaed are modeled in textual witness as women of faith. Already the Hebrew model of Judith is not described in the poem as exercising a Jewish form of prayer. Instead, she has been written by the Anglo-Saxon scribes to exercise a Trinitarian formula derived from the Celtic lorica when addressing God, and more on this matter shortly in my paper. I don't know whether I'm going to touch on that here in the video, but similarly, AEthelflaed is a Christian princess and a daughter of one of the English kings most active in translating Latin religious texts into Old English, as well as promulgating Christian education throughout his realm and tenure as king. Surely this influence affected Aethelflaed's own life posture as a baptized person. End quote, page 22 of my senior thesis. Now we're going to go to another quote from the thesis paper. Quote, furthermore, the need to unite England's various dynastic histories would give witness to Aethelflaed's prudent agency. Newark describes how Aethelflaed's strategy to defeat the Viking along the eastern and northern realms of England was to enact martial unions among the royal families. Page 93, paraphrased. Thus, Aethelflaed would marry Aethelred, a man with a claim as king to Mercia, yet he submitted to the title Earldomen of Mercia. A little garbly there. To support his father-in-law's aims at peace and unity in England. Paraphrase 93. On the surface, this read of history has more to do with patriarchal commonplace objectification of women in support of political aims. But to examine the records more deeply reveals a dynamic and prudent female leadership agency at work. It's an agency evoking the Havatar of pre-conversion Northern European narratives and the independent women, those virgins and widows, leading their contemporaries through exemplary lives of faith and fidelity to the care of the nation. I'm going to stop that quote right there and just say that Havatar is an allusion to another part of my paper that talks about, I can't remember the scholar's name right now, which isn't good while I'm doing this video. I left those notes in the other room. But essentially, in the pre-conversion Northern European world, it wasn't an idea of strong character or weak character being associated primarily with a male or female gender. Sons or daughters could exhibit the Havatar, which is the dominant strength, and I can't remember the weaker term, the term that represented the weaker. So, to the readers of the Judith narrative, they would have been keen to that worldview. It was still not too many centuries in the past. Granted, there were changes that had been taking place, but when it came to strength of leadership, these were people that had their ears keen and their eyes keen to follow the strong leader. It was a matter of survival. Okay. Where was I at here? Yeah. It's the agency of the shield maiden archetype in the Anglo-Saxon social construct. It's considerable to note Aethelflaed is half Mercian through her mother, and so the populace would be aware of her dual claim to reign the region after her husband's death in 911 AD. She was a warrior widow. Yep. Perhaps not unlike Judith in the Hebrew version of the story. Newark shares this 12th century account of her history by William of Malmesbury. Quote, a powerful member of King Edward's, her brother, party, the delight of her subjects and the dread of his enemies. End quote. Page 94. Aethelflaed built fortresses throughout the region, as the Vikings were not the only enemy to the prosperity and peace of the kingdom. Paraphrase, page 96. Also, she sent military units into Wales in 916. taking a Welsh queen prisoner and 33 courtiers until the king submitted to her authority. Paraphrase, page 96. Yet in 917, she would join her brother in battle against the Vikings. As he fought in the south, she was leading her troops in Derby and successfully took the Viking military center, quote, without a need for a siege, end quote. Pages 96 through 97. Her military and political acumen were prudently exercised on many occasions. Paraphrase, page 22. And I want to say, right now I'm going to share a little bit of art on that I did as a student, derived from actual images. AEthelflaed has quite a few images in the medieval world. This one is from the same thing that you'll see on my Prezi, which is from, not this exact image, but it comes from the genealogical Chronicle of English Kings. Okay, and so I just like this one so much because AEthelflaed is peeking out from her little portal in time on this document. She's got her little hand resting as if she's coming out of history to say, I was real. Yep. And then this is the image that you'll see on my Prezi page, which comes from that genealogical roll of kings, connecting to her family tree. And she was known as the Lady of Mercia, also known as the Iron Lady. Just a lot of fun getting to do this art with my daughters and sons this past weekend, getting out all the art supplies. Because there again, art is another way of encountering a portrait of a historical person. Remember, a portrait is really an interpretation about perspective, and I think that the Judith poem is really about the interpretation of what the authors were, the scribes at the time, were taking from an older poem, Anglo-Saxon poem, adapting it for their time. And I want to say that Anglo-Saxon poem that I'm alluding to, the thought that Judith might have been around at an earlier time as an adaptation from the Latin Vulgate is out there as a potential. I have to do more research on that. But as a progression into what it would become at this particular time in history, meaning the 11th century, late 10th or late 11th. I think this quote too from Henry of Huntington, a 12th century English historian, this is his tribute to Aethelflaed. Heroic Aethelflaed, great in martial fame, a man in valor, woman though in name, the warlike hosts, the nature to obeyed, conqueror or both, though born sex, a maid. Changed be thy name, such honored triumphs bring, a queen by title but in deeds a king. Heroes before the Mercian heroine quailed, Caesar himself to win such glory failed. And this is another little piece of art I did. I'm going to try to scan these. I don't know if it's going to work, but this is a map of Aethelflaed's England, so the 19th century. I just want to note that Wessex is where Winchester was and where King Alfred and then Aethelflaed's brother Edward would be king, but this part over here in the east is taken control by the Vikings, and over here is Mercia. This is Mercia. It's a really big region, and that's where Aethelflaed was known as the Iron Lady. It's really quite impressive when you begin to look at the spatial relationship to what this Judith type must have been. Okay, and I'm running out of time, but I want to just share these last little things really quick. These are also images of Aethelflaed. She is on the throne. Just really neat details. You can look at the originals, look them up online, a Google search. And then this, I just wanted to say, since you heard me mention about prudence and that quote from my senior thesis, from the actual poem, it says, Judith, prudent in mind, this woman of elfin beauty. Judith, book 9, or section 9, lines 100 or 13b through 14a, and here is an actual example. I took the initial part of the poem right there, tried writing it in Old English, and these are some images from ancient Mercian coins that I had fun making a motif out of. Aethelflaed never did have coinage struck that had her portrait or her husband's portrait on it, but she did have just flowery type of coins, and so I think these are the ones from that. But this is a quote from the Judith poem now in English, and I'm going to go ahead and read that to you. I would like to be able to read the Old English for you, but I'm not going to attempt that tonight. This is from Judith. She doubted gifts in this white earth. There she readily found protection from the glorious Lord when she had most need of favor from the highest judge, so that he, the Lord of creation, defended her against the greatest terror. The glorious Father in the skies granted her requests, and she always possessed true faith in the Almighty. That's 9 verses 1 through 7a. Okay, and I'm going to leave it at that. There's so many other components in my paper that I didn't get a chance to put in this presentation, but this is already going really long, like over 20 minutes. So, a video. I don't even know if everybody's going to want to watch it, but thank you so much for spending time with me.